Have you ever built a gingerbread house? Maybe it was one of those kits you get at the store. And if I may venture to guess, you probably encountered some difficulties during the building process. Maybe a gingerbread wall snapped, maybe the frosting failed, everything collapsed in on itself. Yeah, it's all part of the process. But what if your process was to make the DC National Mall to scale and then transport it to a location to be seen by possibly tens of thousands of people? Now the pressure's on a little bit more, isn't it? I'm Jordan Mills, and I'm here to tell you about the gingerbread team. From May to December of last year, a group of baking and culinary students here at FCC were given a unique opportunity. They would have the chance to work together with architecture students at the nearby school of CTC to complete an extremely technically specific and a highly accurate model of the DC National Mall. And in only 7 months. The students would be given the challenge of designing and building architecture stretching from the U.S. Capitol to the Lincoln Memorial and down from the White House to the Tom and Jefferson Memorial. This space includes the Washington Monument and also the Smithsonian Museums, and it more or less accounts for the entire space that's known collectively as the National Mall in DC. And as you'll soon see, this process would lead to many trials and tribulations for the gingerbread team. I would like to present to you a story of students working together to achieve a goal far beyond the limitations of the standard college experience. And in doing so, I intend to both celebrate the accomplishments of these creative and pioneering students, and also encourage anyone who watches this to also pursue experiences beyond the standard projects typically supplied by the college experience. But that's all you need to hear about it from me. It wasn't my project after all. My secondhand account could never do the process justice. But I do know someone who can do it justice. I had the opportunity to interview Victoria Piechowski, one of the culinary majors who participated in this impressive undertaking, and I find it far more sensible to hear about the unique experiences of the gingerbread project from its source. This is what she had to say.
Yeah, so my name is Victoria Piechowski, and I'm a culinary major at the HCTI program. I am in my final semester, so I'll be graduating in May. So last spring semester, I was in Baking 1, which is like the foundational baking course. And I'm not a baker by any means. I'm a culinary major. I'm not skilled enough for the baking world. It's very particular. I was enjoying it, and I got really close with the professor. Her name is Chef Missy. I love her to death. She's awesome. And she taught me a lot. Like, I picked up on a lot more than I thought I would. And at the end of the semester, she pulled me aside and kind of told me about the project and that she had a handful of slots to give out and asked me to come be a part of the project. So that's how I got involved. Every student who worked on it, I believe, was selected by a professor who was working on the project. Yeah, so there was a huge range of students, not just like bakers and chefs, not just HCTI, but we partnered with the CTC program at the high school for the architectural students, and they were like a massive help. It was really cool to see how everything came together from all different, educational backgrounds. There were the chefs at the school. The two primary ones were Chef Mark and Chef Missy. They were kind of with us the whole time, helping us design, helping us make the gingerbread, make everything we needed. And then, like I said, they partnered with the architectural students, the whole program at CTC. So there were those high school students and the instructor, Phil Arnold. He was also a massive help. We could not have done this without them. They had like a laser cutter and a 3D printer and all kinds of resources our school didn't have. And it was really cool because it really gave them more of like a practical use for their education. And it showed them like, these are the kind of things you can be involved in more than just designing a house. The Willard team, which is the hotel we worked with, their chefs would come and speak to us periodically, check in, see how we're doing, what we need. But that's about the whole team. Actually, my structure had this little brick walkway, and I sent them gingerbread, and they sent it back with the brick walkway like etched into it. And I was like, whoa, it was so cool. I couldn't even imagine that was a thing that they were able to do.
Was there anything you noticed that felt unique about this collaboration, having these two generally very different majors work together and find like a common ground where they both of their skills could be used together.
Yeah, so I feel like it showed all students, both the high schoolers and us, like what you can really do with these majors. Because I think when you get into, like, say, architectural work, you think, okay, I'm going to design houses forever. But I feel like this kind of showed them, like, there's so much more you can do with your skills, so many niches you can branch into. And same with cooking. I mean, a lot of people hear of a culinary major and think, oh, she's going to go work in a restaurant. But there's so much you can do, like designing these immaculate displays or, working for hotels and working on weddings and making these awesome, like I said, displays. It's really, really cool to see what kind of doors can be opened with these little connections.
How did the team decide what structures they wanted to model the gingerbread after? Was that something like the professors decided on or the students?
So, Chef Mark, he's the one who was in the most contact with the Willard. He knew somebody who worked there, and that's how the project all began. But it was last May. He like brought all of the culinary students in, and I remember he sat us down and he was like, "We're gonna do a 2 scale model of the National Mall," and all of us were like, you think you could do? I can't do that. Like, what are you talking about? So we kind of toned it down a little bit. So we still did the National Mall. It just wasn't as 2 scale. Like when we started, it was going to be like the most realistic National Mall you've ever seen. And then eventually we were like, we need to bring it back a little bit. We are
Yeah.
students.
I think that's a reasonable thing to tone back a little
Yeah,
bit.
when you
Yeah.
first said it, we were all like, huh? But no, it turned out really cool. You could
Yeah.
definitely tell what the structures were. But it was him who pretty much decided that because it was being displayed in DC, so he wanted
Right.
to celebrate the city a little bit. So the whole project was orchestrated by the Willard Intercontinental Hotel. Very interesting hotel. It's been there since the 1800s. They've been doing gingerbread displays for years on years on years, and they've got a team of pastry chefs that do it every year.
Right.
This was only the second time they've had like students do it. So
Wow.
it was a really neat experience, and it was displayed in their lobby at the Willard.
Cool.
And it was the first time the display had ever been made off site. The other students had done it on site and done there. This one was really unique because we made all of it at FCC and it had to get transported to the Willard, which I can tell you was one of the scariest days of my life. Sticking this display that we had spent 7 months on into a U-Haul and letting someone like drive away with it was so horrifying. It worked out actually. I think only one structure got damaged in transit and it wasn't anything significant enough to like destroy the structure. It got fixed with some royal icing. There were a handful of challenges. For one time, a lot of us were working while being students, so finding the time to dedicate to this project was tough. I had one day a week that I was able to get into that baking lab and really put my stuff together. Just the creativity of it, finding different routes to make things. Like my display was the ice skating rink. So I had to find a way to have a clear rink. And I used something called isomelt. It's pretty much what you use to make lollipops, but you just add the flavoring so that it's clear, but you have to heat it to a certain temperature. I don't remember the temperature. And it's really, really cool because you can shape it into whatever you want, whatever mold. But the second it gets like 1 degree over that temperature, it colors. Like it loses its clear. So the amount of isomelt that I had that was like brown within like seconds was insane because I would spend hours just heating it up and then it's brown and then I start again and it's brown and there were days that I like stood in the baking lab being like, why am I even here? Like I can't do this. But those were the kind of challenges you had to face of how am I going to get this perfect? How am I going to get this clear? And how am I not going to lose my mind? We did have some structures break. My friend, she was working on the National Gallery of Art East, and 2 days before display. So we displayed on Monday evening, and we spent the whole weekend at the Willard. We got there at like 8 a.m. on Saturday, stayed till about 5 p.m. Sunday, we got there at 8 a.m., stayed till 5 p.m., just doing all kinds of tweaking. We were in one of their kitchens, decorating, building, doing whatever we had to do to make it come to fruition. And Saturday, around, I want to say like 1 o'clock, her structure had caved in, like almost completely. And we put it back together and it was fine. And then it caved in again. And it was starting to get like, we have 2 days till this thing gets unveiled, and I love her. I felt so horrible. She had to go. She had to step away. It was really bad, but we ended up kind of coming together as a team, and you never would have known. We got it back together, and looking at the pictures, looking at it in person, you never would have known. But it was very stressful in the days leading up to the Willard like unveiling, when things would fall apart or something didn't look the way you wanted it to. There was a lot of teamwork. It was no longer Tori's structure and Amelia's structure. It was now everybody's structure. What can we do to help you get you where you need to be? And it was really cool to work together as a team with people I barely knew at this point.
Was the original plan for the project to like only use edible material and then
Yes.
just like a little bit of super glue in there just to make it actually work because it was so complex?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will let slip, which don't get me in trouble. There were a handful of things on the structure that were not edible. Like my structure had string lights to bring it to light.
Oh, fair enough.
Yeah, so you can't eat that.
Right.
But for the most part, everything on the structures were edible. And the amount of gingerbread we made over those months.
Yeah.
We used the Willard, actually, their pastry team sent over their recipe for making gingerbread. So something we learned in the process was, in order to use it for these structures, you pretty much had to burn it. Because if you didn't, it fell apart. It would get too soft and fall apart. So pretty much all of the gingerbread was like super burnt. Everybody's like, is this edible? And it's like, well,
technically,
but I don't think anybody would want to.
Right.
But it was really, really cool to find the different niches. And, they had led us on to, you can make different like kind of colors of gingerbread for what you need. So some students were using molasses because that makes your gingerbread darker. So if you need a darker color for your structure, you can use that. But then honey makes it lighter. So if you have a lighter building like the National Gallery of Art East, you can use different things to get to the same objective, but make it a little different. I knew nothing about gingerbread before this at all. So we had to get really creative too. We used power tools on them. Where the laser cutter didn't work, we used Dremels. So we had like 3 Dremels at the school with different bits, and say you have like an inch that needs to be taken off, I'm not going to send that to CTC, and have them cut an inch off. So we had little Dremels, and we were sanding our gingerbread and, cutting pieces off. It was really, really cool to think about the things that come into play for something like this. Like, I never would have thought of bakers using power tools, but it was awesome. It was so cool. We could not have done this without those students, no doubt. They were awesome. Especially like given they were high schoolers, they'd send us stuff back. A couple times I'd send them dimensions and they'd send them back and be like, no, do it this way. Right. I'm like, dang, you're smart. Cool. Honestly, I think there was a point for every single one of us bakers and cooks that we all thought, why are we doing this? Like, this is not going to happen. This is not going to work. I know me especially, like I said, the isomelt was such a challenge, and I had never worked with it. So trying to figure it out was a huge challenge. There were many points where I was like, it's just going to be brown. Like, the ice rink is not going to be clear. That's fine. Just get over it. There were a lot of points, I think, where it felt very discouraging, and like I said, there were multiple structures that did kind of fall apart. I know like I mentioned, the National Gallery of Art East had kind of caved in. But another girl was working with isomelt for the botanical gardens. She had like a isomalt dome, and it was immaculate. Like she really killed it. It was the coolest thing, but it caved in, I think, 3 times. 3 times the isomelt had broken and caved in. And I know she fixed it for the last time the Friday before, like unveiling. And she was like, if this breaks, I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, I really don't know how I'll fix it.
Right.
God bless, it didn't. It stayed together. But there were definitely points where we were like biting our nails, praying things would stay together.
I feel like that kind of thing is so much more prone with like the less standard kinds of projects, because you don't have like the legacy of a bunch of people doing it before you. Like, everyone's written a 10-page paper before.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have that context of this can get done and I can do it. Like, you are the person doing this for the first time, doing this unique thing and like setting it up if anyone were to do it in the future. So like, if this succeeds or fails, you're the one finding it out for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
So that there's that level of stress to that.
I feel like we should write a little notebook of like, these are things to remember if someone else does this.
Right.
And it was really unique for me because, like I said, I was not a baking and pastry student. Out of the bakers and cooks, I was the only student who was not in the baking and pastry program.
Right.
I was the only one in the culinary program. So that really freaked me out too because I didn't have a background in baking. I didn't know how to make gingerbread. I didn't know how to make icing. I didn't know. I had to melt chocolate one day to like paint with it. And the chef was like, "Well, do you know how to temper chocolate?" I was like, "What's tempering chocolate?" I thought you just melt it. But turns out when you're like utilizing chocolate to paint with it, you have to have it at the right temperature. And if it goes like 4 degrees above or below, you can't use it anymore. And then you have to re-get it back to that just to use it. And you have to try and hold it there. Like it's a whole process. It was really cool to learn, but it was really intimidating for me because this was not my niche. You know, I'm more into cooking the savory foods. I really didn't know what I was doing half the time. But it was awesome because a lot of the baking and pastry students were really helpful too. You know, they would go out of their way to come help me, show me different processes. It was a big learning curve, but I'm glad I had the chance to do it, you know.
And you know, I just thought for the project taking place over like 7 months, you said, was it?
Mm-hmm.
Did you have to worry about any of it like going bad, or was that not really a problem for a lot of it?
We didn't really start the building, I want to say, until maybe September. So we unveiled the 9th of December. A lot of the initial stages were planning and going to see the structures and trying to figure out who was going to do what structure. That changed a lot. When we started, he had it where there were little teams working on each structure. So like one structure would have 3 people, the next would have 3 people, and you were working on multiple.
Right.
That didn't really work out. You know, people's schedules didn't line up. We had too many structures. It just got to be too much. So he ended up splitting it up and everyone got assigned a structure to work on. And that made it go a lot smoother. But the first few months were a lot of planning, designing, figuring out who's doing what. You know, it was a big learning curve because he had never done this either. You know, so he was leading the project, but learning right alongside us. The hardest part was the royal icing. Because, like I said, that's what we used to. It was our glue, and when the rooms would get too warm and it heated up, it was really bad. Like I had a couple things cave in. I had these little buildings. If you've ever been to the ice skating rink in DC, they have these 2 buildings. One has the Zamboni in it, and the other one is where you like pay and get your skates. So that's what I had built, and my royal icing collapsed multiple times because my roof wasn't like a triangle. It was like I don't know what you'd even call that. It was a bunch of different shapes.
Right.
So it would collapse in on itself a lot. I would have to hold it until the royal ice like hardened. And it was usually like at least 15 minutes until I could let go. And it was always just, how's it going? Just holding my structure so I don't have to cry later. When he first told us, he was like, this is going to be totally to scale. Everything's going to be to scale. And he sent out the scales in the first couple weeks. And they were just intense. Like I remember the Smithsonian Castle. If I remember correctly, it was going to be like 8 inches by 8 inches, which was essentially like a stick of butter by a stick of butter. And if you've ever seen the Smithsonian Castle, that is the most intricate building you will ever see. And I was talking to the girl who was in charge of it, and she was like, no way, I'm going to get the bricks and the windows and everything in there. And then I got the scale for mine, and it was like 2 inches by 2 inches. And we all kind of had to talk to him and be like, we got to figure this out. So that's why we ended up having to take structures out, because if they were too small, you wouldn't get the realism out of it.
Right.
You know, it was too hard for students especially to make them look realistic when being really small. So it was a big learning curve for everybody.
How much bigger did the structures end up being by the end?
My rink was about 10 inches, and then I had stuff off of it. Right. So mine was probably like 1.5 by 1.5 feet. So they got a lot bigger.
Lot bigger.
Yeah. So the final day we were there, the Saturday before we unveiled, none of us left until everybody was done. Because once the last person was working on it, you know, we all came, what can we do? How can we help you? Our structures were made in the basement and then unveiled upstairs. So we had to take them into the elevator, and it was usually like 3 people carrying it, like, oh my God, don't move. Like, if we drop this, we're in trouble. And then we put it on this big board behind a curtain, and it was very surreal, to start to see the pieces come together and really look like the National Mall. But it was also very scary. Like, that night, I was like, can I just sleep here? Like, I don't want anybody to look at this, because it wasn't behind glass or anything. It was just behind this curtain. And there were some kids playing around behind the curtain, and they kept opening it, being like, what's that? Is that candy? And we're like, don't come in here, because if you knock this down, we had the national monument made out of gingerbread. It was pretty tall. So if that toppled over, it was like, you stay out of here. So it was very scary, to leave them behind before, or at the end of Saturday night till Monday. I don't think any of us really slept, praying we'd come back Monday and they'd still be there. But it was also very surreal to see it get unveiled. A lot of people came. There were reporters and people from FCC, people from the Willard team. A lot more people showed up than I thought, our friends, our families. And it was so surreal when they moved the curtain and suddenly, there it is, the National Mall out of candy, essentially. And we had spent so long on it. I remember at the end of the night, when it was time for us to load back on the FCC bus and go home, I texted my mom and I was like, I can't leave. Like, this is wrong. I'm just leaving it here, after all of this.
Right.
But it was very surreal, very exciting, but also very scary. Because once we left, I knew I was never going to see it again. And it's like, what if it collapses and I can't come fix it? Because they had it up for, I think it was there from December 9th to the 31st. So it was up for quite a while. I remember standing there with another girl who was on the Project Laken right before we had to go, and we were looking at it and we were like, what now? Like, we this has been like our whole lives for months. What now?
Yeah.
But it was just very cool, and for months I would get on Instagram and I'd get on the Willard page and people would be like posting pictures of it and our names were there, and I'd be scrolling Instagram and I'd be like, oh, that's my structure. Oh, that's my name. It was very interesting, but very cool to see how many people, not just people who knew about the project, but just people visiting DC, visiting the Willard, seeing our structure. Was very, very cool.
Right.
And it was featured in Forbes magazine for like historic hotels doing gingerbread displays. It was featured in the Frederick News Post, the Washington Post. Like, it was very well circulated. I saw it on TikTok one day. Someone was like, look at this stuff made by college students. And I was like, that's me.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really fun. It was kind of funny. The Frederick News Post did an article on it, and I was on the front page, and I didn't even know about it. Like, I was just minding my own business. I was at the Pennsylvania Christmas show, and my phone started blowing up. Everybody's like, you're on the front page of the Frederick News Post. And I'm like, for what? Like, I was like, what are you talking about?
What did I do?
Yeah, it's like, am I like wanted? And oh, it was so cool. But it was very weird. My dad went and bought like 3 copies of it. It was so funny.
Oh yeah, I bet. But you got to frame it.
Yeah, I have it. I'm proud of all the things I learned. Like I said, I came into this totally blind. All I had was baking 1. I had no baking experience. I didn't particularly enjoy it. So I was really proud of how much I was able to learn and absorb from the other students and the chefs and even the architectural students and their instructor. Sometimes when I look back and think about how much time I spent on that project, it blows my mind. Some things I would have done differently. I think I wish I could have invested more time into it. In the last few weeks, I was really freaking out because I was further behind than I wanted to be. And I was like, I don't think this is going to come together. Like, I really don't think I'm going to get it done in this time frame, because I had not invested as much time as I wanted to. So I feel like if I had given myself more days a week to work on it, it would have been a little less stressful. But that's kind of my only regret with it. The 2 days we were at the Willard, like I said, everything was pretty much built, but it was mostly like, all right, fluff it up now. Add fake snow, add whatever you want to add to make it as realistic as possible. And I was tweaking and tweaking and tweaking and tweaking, and finally I had to step away and be like, okay, this is too much. I'm going too far now, but you can make yourself crazy. That tree's not perfect. That person is not perfect. Right. And you can just drive yourself insane sitting there and tweaking every little thing. So I finally had to be like, all right, I'm done. There's nothing else I want to change. If I sit here and stare at it, I'm going to change the whole thing.
Would you encourage other students to pursue these kinds of projects that are a little less mainstream, a little more unique?
100%. Like I said, there were many points in this project that I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, this is too much. I wish I had never done this. Like, I had a phone call with the chef one day where I was like, I'm crashing out. Like, this is a lot. And she was like, you're okay. Like, it's going to be fine. So it really pushes you to your limits to do something like this. So
Right.
out of your comfort zone. But I would tell everybody to do it because I learned so much. I invested so much. I came out I won't say a different person, but a more shaped person because I did push myself to my limits, and I saw other kids my age push themselves to limits they had never done before and overcome it. And you learn how to handle that stress in a way you have never done before. There was that time constraint, December 9th. If it's not unveiled, we failed. And for months in September, I have till December. All right, it's October, I have 2 months. Oh my God, it's in 2 weeks. Like the timing was really interesting too, because it really taught us how to manage that time well, and manage the stress of it. So I would highly recommend it to any student. You'll never grow if you're not uncomfortable, especially in the culinary industry. I could go make salads for the rest of my life, and I'll be great at it. I'll never grow if I do something like that. And that's exactly how that industry is. You have to push yourself to be better, or you'll never be better if you don't do that.
Yeah.
So I highly recommend it to anybody.
I absolutely agree. It really does just show you what you can do. It's like a whole new level of just showing you what you're capable of.
Never would have dreamed that was something I could do. I remember coming home after agreeing to it and being like, oh my God, like I can't do this. And I did, and I think a lot of people would have the same feelings of like, we're making the National Mall. Like I thought I was making a house, know, and it worked, and it was really, really cool. So I would definitely recommend it. Yeah.
All right, great.
Well, thanks for giving me a chance to talk about it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. This was awesome. Thank you for agreeing to meet me with all of the craziness going on last half of the semester.
Yeah, gotta love it.
Yeah, so thank you. Before I continue, I want to take a moment to thank Victoria for taking the time to speak with me. She was delightful and very patient with my amateur interview setup. I couldn't have done this project without her. I know I, for one, am extremely inspired by what Victoria and her teammates were able to accomplish, and to me it speaks volumes to the value of being willing to step outside your comfort zone and go beyond the standard expectations of the college experience. In the interview, Victoria and I discussed the value of doing something difficult to prove to yourself that you are capable of it and to show yourself how far you can go. And I think that is what lies as the heart of any project like this. Making this documentary for me was certainly that kind of uncharted experience that the Gingerbread Project was for Victoria, though certainly on a much smaller scale. And I can say with confidence that despite my own struggles with the process of creating this documentary, such as having to teach myself how to edit video footage and learn through trial by fire the best practices for conducting a video interview, I absolutely agree with Victoria that going outside the mold with school projects is such a character-building experience, and it's so valuable in just being able to grow as a person. It goes a long way in showing yourself that you can accomplish whatever you set your mind to. So, I would like to close out this documentary with a sort of call to action. Please, I encourage you all to go out and pursue the project you want to pursue. It may not be easy, and it may not be as smooth of an experience as you originally imagined, but it will be completed and it will be yours, and nothing can take that accomplishment or that experience from you. So, if Victoria and her teammates are any indication, pursuing these projects is never easy, but it's also never worth passing up. So please, go for it. Pursue your projects. Pursue what you want to do. And thank you for watching. Good luck in your pursuits.